Good evening, and thank you for joining me for another Boring Books for Bedtime. I hope tonight's selection provides all the boredom your busy brain needs to quiet down and let you get some sleep. Before we begin, I'd like to give a special shout out of thanks to some new members of our Patreon family: Nancy, John, Ryan, Anna, Tara, and Carl. Thank you all so much for supporting this podcast. By becoming members of Patreon, you help us remain 100% listener supported and ad-free for everyone, and it's very much appreciated. If you're interested in supporting Boring Books for Bedtime and finding out more about the perks available to subscribers, including exclusive episodes, full books, and some upcoming giveaways for the holidays, you'll find a link to Patreon in the show description. You'll also find a link to buymeacoffee.com, where you can support us with a one-time tip, no subscription required. I hope you'll take a moment to check them out. Now, let's read and relax. Find a comfortable spot. Adjust your volume. Take a nice deep breath in. Let it out slowly. And off we go. Tonight, let's relax with some more practical advice about studying art abroad and how to do it cheaply, by Abigail May Alcott Nieriker. First published in 1879 by Roberts Brothers, Boston. Let's pick up right where we left off at the beginning of Chapter 3. Let's begin. Chapter 3: Clothes, Shops, and Addresses. Perhaps after 6 months or more of painting, our student wishes to replenish her wardrobe and begins to haunt the shops and wonder which are the best to patronize and where a good dressmaker can be found. If so, a few hints on these points may not be unwelcome, for even to a busy, economical woman who only wishes to be neatly and tastefully dressed, whether at work or play, the subject of clothes must sometimes become a necessary consideration. And to combine beauty with cheapness is always found to be difficult, so one discovers with satisfaction that substantial cloth of all kinds and dress goods cost less in London than elsewhere. There is little taste or style, to be sure, shown in any of the ready-made costumes displayed in the windows at such reasonable prices, but at Howells and James, Regent Street, Peter Robinson's, Oxford Street, or through court and theatre furnishers, pretty and well-made suits can be obtained. Evidently, the English do not, like American ladies, believe in the oft-quoted remark that there is a repose in being well-dressed that religion fails to give, for nowhere is the so-called dowdy as frequently encountered as in the great capital. A certain class of Londoners express a praiseworthy disapproval of slavishly imitating fashions set by the Parisian demi-monde, though unfortunately most of those holding this opinion entirely lack the eye for color and effect, which, without going to any extreme, can produce a charming ensemble. Perhaps, then, the task of combining English sense with French taste must be left to my countrywomen, together with the wearing of waterproofs, thick boots and heavy materials, so characteristic of the former, with the same grace as the exquisite but less durable fabrics of the latter. Possibly our student, like Miss Hosmer, loves art much, but horses more, and needs a new habit in which to occasionally take a turn in Rotten Row or refresh a weary head by a ride to Richmond Park. If this should be the case, she will go to Wolmershausen, Curzon Street, Mayfair, and after selecting a suitable cloth, is shown to the fitting room, where, summoned by a bell, a gentlemanly individual appears, and somewhat to her surprise, proceeds in a business-like manner to take the necessary measures. On a second visit, she mounts a life-size rocking horse, and endeavors to find a flaw, if possible, in the faultlessly fitting garment, the skirt of which, cut with a peculiar gore at the knee, hangs in most graceful folds. One masterly stroke of the scissors, forming what is known as the Wolmershausen gore, has alone given this establishment its worldwide reputation, though not only habits, but every description of costumes, to the thinnest ball dress, is made here in an equally perfect manner. Consequently, though the first cost is perhaps somewhat greater than at other places, patronage of the Mayfair firm will in the end prove economical. A beaver riding hat for a lady also, only to be purchased in the United States for $7 or $8, can be had at Sparrow's in High Holborn for 12 or 13 shillings, which certainly shows a considerable difference. Reliable black silks, either bonnet or of English manufacture, must be sought for at Hilditch's, less being demanded for the former by this house than at the company's establishment in Lyons, it has been affirmed by travelers. The India Outfitting Company supplies the best of ready-made underclothes and waterproof cloth by the yard. Also Schoolbread or Bennett, Southampton Row, the most substantial hosiery at reasonable prices. London is the city of all others in which to buy furs, and August the time to pay from 8 to 20 guineas and become the possessor of a long sealskin paletot or silk fur-lined circular in which to defy the cold of many American winters. Bonnets, ribbons, feathers, and little things are spoken of as presents at Whitley's, where a lunch too is offered free of charge to anyone making large purchases, after the style of the cake and syrup given ladies at the Bon Marché in Paris. But to any one of thrifty disposition, with patience enough to delay buying until the close of the London season, when articles of every description are marked down to the lowest figures, shopping will become a pleasure. A resident of England for any length of time will undoubtedly choose the civil service or Army and Navy stores as being preferable to others in every respect, particularly if living in lodgings and providing for oneself, when a ticket to the grocery department will save many pence in the course of a year, and the quality of everything be warranted. It is taken for granted that a painter will not neglect before leaving to lay in a large stock of watercolors from Winsor and Newton's, Rathbone Place, as such are so much more expensive elsewhere. Also paper of all kinds, whether for artistic or literary purposes. Mr. Callan, will do any framing of pictures neatly and cheaply, or act as exhibition agent if desired to do so, though by asking for a bony catalogue at any color shop, all dates and necessary details can be obtained for attending to such matters without an agent's assistance. Teachers of watercolors. Mr. Nufteal, 4 St. Stephen's Square, Bayswater. Mr. L. G. Bumford, 5 Lanark Villas, Maida Vale, St. John's Wood, West. Mr. E. Green, 3 Circus Road, St. John's Wood. Mr. Queen, Oakfield House, Park Road, Haverstock Hill, Northwest. Mr. R. P. Noble in Charlotte Street, Fitzroy Square. Mr. Reed's, Wells Street, from Oxford Street. Mr. J. Steeple, 18 Leighton Crescent, Brecknock Road. Mr. L. Carlyle, 56 Adelaide Road, Haverstock Hill, Northwest. Mr. Needham, Sunnyside, Sutton, Surrey. Miss Charlotte Fillot, 259 Stanhope Street, Mornington Crescent, Northwest, for heads and figures. Boarding and lodging houses. Miss Hills, 14 Thayer Street, Manchester Square, prices high. Miss Jack, 9 Dorset Square, prices high. Miss Chinch, 82 and 84 Seymour Street, prices moderate. Miss Reddit, 86 Seymour Street, Hyde Park. Miss Fleming's, 15 New Cavendish Street. Miss Rutter, 9 Woburn Place. Mrs. Warner, 23 Torrington Square, cheap. Mrs. Wasley, 43 Upper Bedford Place, clean and very reasonable. Mrs. Adams, 37 Somerset Street, Portman Square, 10 shillings for room and meals as one orders. 25 and 59 Torrington Square, excellent lodgings. Mr. Burr, 2 Queen's Square, 23 Norfolk Street, Strand, a small hotel. Mrs. Brown, Warwick, can be heard of at Tim's Baker's Shop, Main Street. Miss Wareham, number 3 Crosby Terrace, Leamington, neat lodgings and excellent food. Mrs. Piper, 156 Walton Street, Oxford. The Blossoms, Chester, Shakespeare Arms, Stratford. Shops. Scott Addy's, Regent Street, for waterproofs. Howell and James, Regent Street, for dresses. Peter Robinson, Oxford Street, for dresses. Hilditch, 3 Cheapside, for black silks. Skullbreads, Tottenham Court Road, for hosiery. Cook's, 71 Oxford Street, for furs. Sparrow and Son, 66 High Holborn, for riding hats. India Outfitting Company, Cheapside, for ready-made underclothes. Whiteley's, Westbourne Grove, for bonnets, ribbons, etc. Brodie and Middleton, 79 Long Acre, for cheap art materials. Callan's, 12 Great St. Andrew's Street, Bloomsbury, for cheap frames. Niche and Wardour Streets for antiquity shops. Covent Garden Market for fine flowers. Civil Service stores or Army and Navy shops for every description of article and provisions at strictly just prices, but a card from a subscriber is necessary. Leaper and Dawson, Vere Street, excellent dressmakers. Chapter 4. Paris. The American art student who gives but a week to London and watercolors before passing on to the gayer city Paris for an education in oils will find it economical, if not provided with a through ticket by the steamer company, to cross the Channel by almost any route rather than fashionable Calais and Dover, say Dieppe and Newhaven for instance, where the fare is but 30 francs, second class, the baggage rates very low, and the boats of the company larger and more comfortable. Arrived in the metropolis and turning toward what is often called the painters' quarter of the Rive Droit, or north side of the Seine, that circuit lying between the Gare du Nord and Gare Saint-Lazare, the Opera House and Montmartre, finds almost every block on Boulevard Clichy, Rochechouart, and the intervening streets entirely given up to studios. For not only do some of the leading masters, like Bonnet, Jerome, and Miller, meet their classes in that locality, but also have their private residences there. All Paris, however, is apt to strike a newcomer as being but one vast studio, particularly if seeing it for the first time of a morning, either in summer or winter, between 7 and 8 o'clock, when students bearing paint-box and toile swarm in all directions, hurrying to their courses, or still more when artistic excitement reaches its height during the days appointed for sending work to be examined by the jury of the Salon. Then pictures literally darken the air, borne on men's shoulders and backs, packed in immense vans, or under an arm of the painter himself, all going to the same destination, the Palais de l'Industrie on the Champs-Élysées. L'École des Beaux-Arts, beside Monsieur Jackson and other masters, attracts many to the Latin Quarter for forming another little art world. So a stranger decides each arrondissement offers some advantages, and it is not a question of so much importance as in limitless London, where one selects an abode. But to a party or painter, counting expense and crossing the Atlantic for several years of study in Paris, to hire and furnish an apartment is undoubtedly much cheaper than any hotel or pension can be, for living, until one learns the real French manner of doing it, is quite as high as in America, and a visitor is sadly disappointed if cheapness is expected to be found in anything beyond gloves and Turkey carpets. To furnish even a small apartment prettily takes time and trouble, as every woman knows. But if one chooses to spend a few hundred francs at Hotel Drouot, the great auction rooms of Paris, a fine collection of useful and ornamental furniture may be bought for surprisingly little money. Not perhaps quite new, but if carefully selected, suitable to adorn an American studio when no longer needed in France. And as household articles after a year's use, together with bric-a-brac, which belongs in the category of artists' tools of trade, can pass the customs free. The question of heavy duties in transporting such has not to be considered. It is found very convenient and even necessary to number in a party about to settle in Paris one member of a domestic turn of mind, as a bonne femme de ménage and blanche jeunesse each need careful looking after, for like the merchants, they seem to consider all foreigners as fair prey, and proceed to fleece such unfortunates to the best of their ability. It has never been my happy experience to find one of this class who could be called strictly honest, and it becomes almost laughable to see how, like so many among the Irish help of America, they make a decided distinction between the purse and the provisions of a mistress. For though a pile of gold may be safely left for any length of time within reach, everything, from butter to charcoal, is unhesitatingly appropriated in the cuisine, and family or relations in the neighborhood luxuriously supported thereon. Some ladies do not mind such trifles and quietly submit, paying the 30 francs demanded for servants by a bonne maid, beside board, clothes, and lodging per month without a murmur. Others try to settle this vexed question of help by preparing breakfast and lunch for themselves, only engaging a femme de ménage at 5 sous per hour for all other work and cooking the dinner. I have known ladies coming to Paris for only a short time, wishing to accomplish much shopping or sightseeing with economy, be very comfortable by taking a room at the Grand Hôtel de Louvre, where by aid of a spirit lamp, a delicious cup of coffee is provided in the morning, lunch taken at a restaurant in any part of the city where their wanderings may have led them, returning only at night for the substantial table d'hôte of the hotel. Still another way, which has been followed by many students with success, is to hire a furnished room in some small hotel, such as one finds in Rue de Douai, for instance, at a franc per day. Make one's breakfast of a roll and cup of coffee taken at a crèmerie, buying lunch en route for the studio, and at 6 o'clock going to the nearest Duval establishment for a dinner, costing from 1 franc 50 centimes upward. This, amounting in all to about 4 francs per day, a lady affirmed, judging from her own experience, was by far the cheapest and simplest arrangement possible for one intent on studying art in Paris. For though it may have a somewhat homeless sound in description, yet the French live so entirely in the theaters, cafes, and on the boulevards, that a stranger looks in vain for anything corresponding to an English or American home, the comfort and beauty of which, like the word itself, seeming quite unknown in the frivolous capital. Then, too, supposing our artist wants to study from early until late, and has perhaps sufficient strength and eyesight for the evening séance at the chosen course, the hours are so fully occupied, there is no time for homesick repinings. So I will try to aid in the accomplishment of her plans if possible, by mentioning some classes for instruction that have come under my notice. Firstly, then, is the well-lighted and ventilated studio of Monsieur Krug, number 11, Boulevard Clichy, devoted to female students in all branches of art, and where the much-discussed question of the propriety of women studying from the nude is settled in a delicate and proper manner by the gentlemanly director. Here one has the great advantage of severe and discriminating criticism, 2 mornings in each week, from Monsieur Carl Miller, the painter of the well-known Conciergerie during the Reign of Terror, hanging in the Luxembourg, and the recipient of every honor France has to bestow on a man of genius. Monsieur Cotte and the sculptor Carrier-Belleuse also visit the class to inspect the afternoon and evening drawings. Monsieur Krug's prices are moderate, being 100 francs per month for the 2 daily and 1 evening séance, with no extra charge for the excellent models provided, or for towels, soap, etc., as is often the custom. This is, on some accounts, for an American lady new to painting and Paris, the best atelier she could choose, for many are overcrowded, badly managed, expensive, or affording only objectionable companionship. Still, the pupils or admirers of each leading painter sing his praises loud and long, and those who receive ladies are Messieurs Chaplin, Barret, Duran, Cabanel, Jackson, Luminet, Bouguereau, Robert Fleury, and Lefebvre. Then there is Julien's upper and lower school in Passage Panorama, where a student receives criticism from the first leading authorities, and is surrounded by splendidly strong work on the easels of the many faithful French, who for years have crowded the dirty, close rooms, though I believe the lower school, as it is called, or male class, no longer opens its doors to women, for the price being but 1/2 that of the upper school attracted too many. Also, with better models and a higher standard of work, it was yet found to be an impossibility that women should paint from the living nude models of both sexes side by side with Frenchmen. This is a sad conclusion to arrive at, when one remembers the brave efforts made by a band of American ladies some years ago, who supported one another with such dignity and modesty in a steadfast purpose under this ordeal, that even Parisians, to whom such a type of womanly character was unknown and almost incomprehensible, were forced into respect and admiration of the simple earnestness and purity which proved a sufficient protection from even their evil tongues. Monsieur Julien himself confessing that if all ladies exercised the beneficial influence of a certain Madonna-faced Miss N among them, anything would be possible. Something beside courage was needed for such a triumph, and young women of no other nationality could have accomplished it, though it must be acknowledged a like clique will not easily be met with again. So, let those who commonly represent the indiscreet, husband-hunting, title-seeking butterfly as the typical American girl abroad at least do her the justice to put this fact on record to her credit. It only needs, however, the cooperation of a sufficient number of earnest female students to form a club, hire a studio, choose a critic, and engage models, to secure the same advantages now enjoyed only by men, at the same exceedingly low rates. This plan was seriously talked of not long ago, and only failed of being put into execution from the want of one member with time and energy enough to take upon herself the responsibility of making a beginning. But it is the right thing to be done, and the only way open at present to successfully rectify the injustice of prices charged by Parisian masters for art instruction to women. Though strange to say, these same masters, outside of their own studios, are generous of their time and will seldom refuse criticism to a class of ladies entirely free of charge. This, however, may not be from wholly disinterested motives, as pupils are constantly proving by their ability and success that time has not been wasted on them, and the honors received can only give added luster to the master's name and make his troop of followers the larger. American women particularly are beginning to lead in this direction, so there should be no pains spared to remove all obstacles in the most direct path to a thorough education for them, by bringing the best in every branch within their too often limited means. An unprejudiced judge of pictures in Paris, making the tour through the studios of Americans of both sexes, and carefully examining the work found there and at the Salon consecutive seasons, cannot but admit that in many instances that of the women is far superior, and what is somewhat surprising, far stronger in style than most of that done by the men. If Mr. John Sargent be accepted, whose portrait of Carolus Duran alone undoubtedly places him in the first rank of painters, there is no other male student from the United States in Paris today exhibiting in his pictures the splendid coloring always found in the work of Miss Mary Cassatt from Philadelphia, or the strength and vigor of Miss Dodson's Deborah, particularly remarked in this year's Salon. It is something of a boast for America to possess even these women candidates for artistic honors, whose work bears favorable comparison with so much that is excellent done by the men of the same nationality, and that of the French in the great exhibitions. For even among the latter, a nation of painters as it is, the names only of Rosa Bonheur, Nellie Jacquemart, Louise Abema, and Sarah Bernhardt occur as having so far distinguished themselves in art. With the last named, too, it seems more the versatility of talent shown by the leading actress of the Théâtre Français than real merit as sculptor or painter which attracts the crowd about any production of hers. And what is notably striking in the pictures of Rosa Bonheur is her bold, almost masculine use of the brush, compared with the more delicate, even uncertain style of her brother, Jules Bonheur. A stranger seeing the two canvases side by side would unhesitatingly select hers as the work of the man. Of the same lady, Monsieur Krug tells a story. Some years ago, before Barbizon became the rendezvous it now is for artists from every part of the globe, he, together with a party of painters, went to that corner of the beautiful forest of Fontainebleau on a sketching trip, and in coming and going from the one little hotel the town contained, they often met a slender, solitary youth who, with easel and colors, seemed from early until late intent only on work. His great reserve and unsociability awakened naturally enough some curiosity about him, until it was discovered that the youth was no other than the distinguished Rosa Bonheur, who for greater independence had donned male attire to paint unknown at Barbizon. The artist religiously kept her secret, and not until long after did she learn that she had been recognized and her disguise of little account. The art school which she founded, and which, if I am not mistaken, bears her name, has successfully operated for years and offers many advantages free of all cost to the aspiring young French girl. Monsieur Jackson, who holds a high rank as draftsman, though little is heard or seen of his pictures, enjoys a great reputation as a teacher, being severe in criticism, exceedingly thorough in method, and slow to allow a pupil to begin in color until well grounded in drawing. He visits the lower gallery of the Louvre twice a week, where many of his class draw in charcoal from the antique, as this is thought the best preparation for beginning from life, which seems at first so insurmountably difficult. His atelier is in Rue des Beaux-Arts, and his prices are somewhat high, being 100 francs a month for one daily séance. Fantin Latour, whose work, so often exposed in London shop windows, has only to be seen to be admired, has his apartment in the same street, and occasionally takes pupils for moderate remuneration. Charles Jacques also, whose sheep, amid such rich forest scenery, seem to blink at a spectator from so many frames, considers Americans his best patrons, and will receive a student desirous of becoming an animal painter. There are stories told, too, of a famous artist living at Ecouen, who has one entire side of his ground floor working room built of glass, and opening directly into a yard where his favorite animals are kept ready for study at all times. But the name of this gentleman is discreetly withheld, together with the fact of whether he would willingly allow pupils the same advantages as those arranged for himself. Ecouen, since couture no longer attracts Americans to the little village on the hill as a common meeting ground for students, has become very popular, for not only is living cheap and the country pretty, but Monsieur Edouard Frere does much not only as painter and teacher, but by hospitably opening his salon once a week to make the town an agreeable residence for strangers. Before turning toward the banlieue, an artist may think it best to copy some of the Rembrandts of the Louvre, so often suggested by Bonnat to his pupils as good practice, or the smaller yet attractive pictures in the Lacaze room, or even put an easel up before the more modern ones in the Luxembourg, though the charming old Hotel Cluny, with its ruined baths standing in the pretty garden, its spiral stone staircase leading to the quaint little chapel, royal chambers, and even royal bed above, and the many chariots and interesting relics of the museum below, will prove, I imagine, irresistible. The picturesque front, with its antique windows and fine stonework, old well and escutcheons, makes in itself a good subject for color at the entrance, though to take it from the opposite sidewalk would not be easy. Sketching in the open air in Paris being surrounded by all kinds of difficulties, from the permission which must be demanded of the authorities to the impertinent rabble that immediately collects to look over one's shoulder. To avoid all this, the painters of street scenes, a subject most fashionable just now, resort to hiring a fiacre by the hour, seated in which, with pencil or brush, they can catch a likeness of the passers or desired object, unobserved, and unmolested. An order for working in the museum or the grounds surrounding it is easily obtained from an official in his office on the second floor, if a student is not discouraged by the disagreeable concierge, who gives as little information as possible on the subject and is very reluctant to show the way up. Everybody goes to Saint-Germain-en-Laye to enjoy the extended view while dining in the hotel garden, or to Saint-Denis to examine the church and relics, to the Sèvres China Manufactory, or Versailles for its picture gallery, Trianon and Grand Eau, or taking one of the bateaux mouches, which from the quay ply the river in each direction, goes as far as St. Cloud to walk in the park and climb the hill to the walls of the once fine chateau, or, after the fashion of the pleasure-loving Parisians, mounts a tram on a Sunday for visiting the fort and forest of Vincennes. Very possibly, however, a good Puritan would hardly accept that last suggestion, or approve the hard-working French ouvrier, who with big dinner basket takes wife and children to spend this day of leisure in some neighboring wood. For Sunday is wholly the people's day in France, and always a gay one. Galleries, theaters, and every place of entertainment being open. Yet there is less drunkenness and disorder than at other times, the extra trains bearing the bourgeois by thousands into the country. Many Americans resident in Paris resort in summer to the towns named above, preferring a taste of country life to watering places and the sea. But all of these resorts, especially Versailles, Saint-Germain, and St. Cloud, are fashionable and more or less expensive, the farmers and market gardeners preferring to transport their products directly to the central city halls, to selling in smaller quantities nearer home. And this makes provisions and actual living higher than in the capital itself, though rents and other things are proportionately less. Even Ville d'Avray, Meudon, and the smaller places are not found to be as cheap as a stranger might expect, but apartments are plenty and the scenery picturesque. Meudon deserves description a little more in detail, as an artist could select no lovelier spot for sojourning in any of the environs, and it is easily reached in 20 minutes from the Gare Montparnasse by the Rive Gauche for Versailles. The well-known view from the terrace of Paris, with its many spires, gilded dome of the Invalides, and towers of the Trocadero, relieved against the steep rise of Montmartre, the Seine winding under its white arched bridges, almost to one's feet at Bas-Meudon, makes on a sunny day a truly dazzling panorama, which fully equals, if not surpasses, that famous view of Rome from the Pincio. The air is like champagne, wonderfully clear and invigorating, for Meudon is built along the sloping sides of a hill, rising very abruptly from the Seine and green Val Fleury. It seems quite on a level with Mont Valérien, whose embattled summit shows finely through the vista formed by the beautiful lime trees on either hand of the Avenue du Château. The building to which this fine avenue conducts was erected by the Grand Dauphin, son of Louis XIV, who died in it, Napoleon fitting it up for Marie Louise, to be destroyed in 1871 by the shells of the Prussians, so that now only 3 sides of it remain, one corner of the outer pediment serving as an observatory, the rest as barracks or stables. The artist will walk delightedly about the village, and perhaps discover the straggling pathway leading to the plateau at the foot of the chateau wall, from which one commands a very extended prospect, the lofty viaduct and wooded valley, with the red roofs of Issy making a becoming fond for the large wheels turning like windmills on the hill of Fleury, or for the stone abreuvoir, where noble Normandy horses in heavy harnesses, blue sheepskin collars, and squirrel tails dangling at their ears, drink in close proximity to the peasants washing their salads. But the charms of the far-reaching Bois de Meudon are beyond description, it not being carefully laid out in walks and artificial ponds, but all is wild and picturesque along its broad avenues, which in times past have seen so much royal hunting. In autumn, when the wood women, in bright handkerchiefs, stiff skirts, and sabots are at work, or the woodcutters, in blue blouses, their scarlet belts filled with glistening knives, sing as they chop, amid the rich russet tints of the grand old trees, it is like opening a portfolio of sketches by Mallet. Perhaps other woods are quite as beautiful, although that at Saint-Germain, Saint-Cloud, or Vincennes cannot compare with it. Yet the Bois, with the attractive views and healthy air, makes Meudon a most charmingly artistic retreat for an outing. Farther off from Paris, Grez, near Namur, within walking distance of Barbizon and donkey ride of Fontainebleau, has its admirers. For this small hamlet, never heard of until lately, when rumors of its picturesqueness and the free life led there have reached the studios, has now become quite popular. One painter after another, with mind filled by many lingering doubts as to what it would be like, has ventured to go, generally being received on his arrival by all the inhabitants of the town, who turn out to see each newcomer and divide any luggage among themselves for transportation to the one little inn, which until this year has been the only accommodation afforded. The place has its old bridge and ruin, its boating and bathing, the river making these possible for ladies as well as gentlemen, flannel shirts and tramp dresses being the order of the day. Fine clothes are out of place and strictly forbidden by the freedom-loving set, which now annually meets in the small rooms of the auberge, where board was from 4 to 5 francs per day, but lately, since a hotel has been started, the rate is raised to 6 francs, I am told. The address can be found in the list at the end by anyone desirous to try roughing it a little in France, for Grez quite corresponds on one side of the Atlantic to Clark's Island off Plymouth, Mass. On the other. And though not by the sea, it still possesses the same charm to those who have once been adventurous enough to spend a summer there. And with that bit of travel advice, I think we'll end this evening's reading from Studying Art Abroad and How to Do It Cheaply by Abigail May Alcott Nieriker, who you may recall was the youngest sister of Louisa May Alcott and the model for Amy in Little Women. Reading this really makes me wish I could go back to those times and see those places, so many of which have been lost to history. I hope you enjoyed that tour as well. If you'd like to read this work for yourself, there's a copy available at the Internet Archive, and I'll leave a link in the show description for you. If you'd like to connect, suggest a boring book you'd like to hear read, or request more from one we've already started, you can drop me an email via our website, www.boringbookspod.com. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me for this evening's reading. Until our next boring book, good night.